Hi, I'm with Mary Jean Duran from Duran Alvarez Solutions, who's a political consultant throughout the country. What we wanted to do is to ask Mary Jean some of her experiences regarding research, how she has done research, how she's directed research, and how it has been successful for her. So, Mary Jean, when you are hiring researchers, how do you decide if you're getting results that are actually worthwhile?
Typically, there's some ballpark that you expect that the research is going to come back in. And if you look at the preliminary research and it's not only not in the ballpark, but it's like a different sport, there is something fundamentally wrong with that research. Then, unfortunately, the other way is you learn the hard way, you learn through experience. If you've hired research, you've done the research, and the market doesn't reflect the research, that is not the market's issue, that is the research's issue. And you either don't do research with that firm again, or you tweak the way that you did the research in order to get the results that you need.
So if they're out of sync or not out of sync or not aligned with previous research, how are you able to determine whether that was the previous research that you've tapped into, whether you've hired it or just received it otherwise, or if the current researcher is off base? In other words, which is the standard, which is the correct version, and which is the one that's out of touch, out of sync?
The correct version is the one that reflects the market.
How do we know that?
That happens over years.
Okay.
The pollsters that I know that I really like have been doing this for decades. John McLaughlin is a great example of that, and they are mentored by other researchers that have taught them the tools of the trade. And by the way, the tools of the trade keep evolving. It is a science. Research is an actual science. And you need to not only know the tools of the trade, but you need to be bright enough to be able to change with the market. One of the changes that's happened now with polling is the number of people that no longer have landlines in their homes. They just have a cell phone. That has thrown, for the last several cycles, that has thrown polling just for a complete loop. And there's still some science in trying to adjust for that. But that's the type of thing that you see the market changing in front of you, and you need to at least try to adjust for that.
Tell us why McLaughlin does a particularly good job. I know that you are a big fan, you've talked about that in the past, but why is his work so believable, so important?
He's very smart. If you are a smart client, you will get great data from this man. For example, we were doing some research a while ago, and it was focused on Hispanic market research. Now, you might guess with a name like John McLaughlin, he's not Latino. It's a great example of you do not need to be Latino in order to market to that audience, but you do need to know you do need to know your audience, and you do need to know what you're offering that audience. So one of the things that he did is it was a phone poll that was put out. He had fully bilingual pollsters put the poll out, and a percentage of them started the questions with, "Hello, my name is, do you have a few minutes to answer a few questions?" And a certain percentage started with, "Hola, me llamo Juan, tienes un poco de tiempo para da 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 da." So for people who were Spanish dominant, they could answer those questions. And for people who were not Spanish dominant, they could answer those questions. But if you start off in English to a Spanish dominant household, you are likely to get hung up on, and your sample size will not be appropriate.
Okay, so talking about his sample and his questions, was his secret part of getting the better sample or getting the better questions?
Polling and research is the ultimate example of garbage in, garbage out. A very good pollster, if I am looking for research that shows that 20% of Californians believe that Earth is flat, a good pollster will give me research that demonstrates that 20% of Californians believe that the Earth is flat. It was obviously garbage questions in, it was obviously a garbage sample, and an ethical pollster won't take that assignment.
Right.
But it's an example of both of them. If you have the best questions on Earth, but you don't have the right sample, you're not going to have the right result. You have to have them both.
Can you give us an example in your career of maybe the worst example, or an example of some purported research that led to such a horrible result because of bad questions or a bad sample, or maybe even not any research at all, but where a political campaign or a business campaign totally came off the rails because of the research component, if you like.
Sure, sure. And the example that I'll use, I not only do political consulting, I do business consulting as well. And the example I'll use comes from a corporate world, and the organization will stay anonymous. But there was a.
But you can tell us.
No. So there was a new product that was being rolled out, and research being done together about that product, and it was comparing it to a competitor's product. The result did not reflect what the marketer wanted, except for a tiny little sliver of the final research. That person took that tiny little sliver of the final research, presented it to the corporation, convinced the corporation to do a national ad campaign featuring that piece of research, which resulted in, and I'm at this point, I can't remember if there was an actual lawsuit or just a threatened lawsuit, but there were legal bills and there was a lack of reputation. And they had to go and publicly apologize for putting forth advertising based on bad data.
We face that all the time. In so many cases, the client wants research only to say they did research rather than to use that data, those results from real people, real voters, real constituents, in order to do a better job for the organizations that have hired them. So my final question to Mary Jane is your Starbucks order. This is, after all, I have 5 questions coffee.
Well, and I'm Cuban, so I'm happy to answer this question. Large half-calf drip, no room for cream.
Thank you, Mary Jane. Appreciate your support tonight.
It's my pleasure.
You.